Closing arguments are set to begin tomorrow in the first criminal trial of a former U.S. president. Donald Trump faces 34 counts of allegedly falsifying records to cover up a so-called hush money payment made to adult film actor Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. Prosecutors called 20 witnesses to the stand in an effort to state their case. The defense called 2 witnesses to testify on behalf of the former president. Trump did not testify in his own defense. Let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson for more on this. So, Jessica, what do you expect to hear tomorrow? And how do you think the fact that the former president didn't testify will factor in? I mean, do you think jurors will be asking themselves, why didn't we hear from him about this?
They might, but they'll get an instruction that they can't consider that, because we know that defendants have a right not to testify. And we know that the prosecutors can't say, and shouldn't you wonder, jury, why the defendant here didn't testify? That's not allowed. And so they might to themselves think about that, but it's not something that they should consider. It's also the case that in the vast majority of criminal cases, defendants don't testify because the risks are so big, particularly on cross-examination. When it comes to this particular defendant testifying, I think we can all imagine what that cross-examination might look like. Think about the cross-examination of Michael Cohen, how that lasted days and days, and there were lots of questions about his credibility. That would have happened, and even more so when it comes to the former president. In terms of what we can expect tomorrow, I think we can expect the prosecution to say, this case isn't that hard. Sure, there's a number of different steps you, the jury, have to take, but let's look at all the evidence you heard. Let's look at what makes most sense here, and then let's go ahead and convict. The defense will do the opposite. They'll say this case is really complicated. There's so many different times where you have to find the intent to defraud or intent to commit another crime. Are you really sure that all of this old evidence and testimony about old events adds up to a conviction?
So the jurors have been away from the case for the past week. How difficult do you think it will be to bring the jury back up to speed?
So I think that this is a good moment for both sides to reboot and to say, let's remember why we're here. For the prosecution, I think, again, they're going to say, we heard a lot of testimony, a lot of days, a lot of evidence, but here's what it all boils down to. And it'll give them a chance to, frankly, summarize the case without having to do that, 2 hours after the last witness. They'll say, we've been apart for a long time. Let's remember what's going on here. For the defense, they're going to have to remind the jury step by step, weren't you kind of questioning that witness? Didn't that evidence seem inconsistent with the prosecution's case? So for both sides, it will be a lot of reminders to the jury about what they heard.
This is something that I've been asking myself, but what happens if Trump is convicted? And we have a CBSNews.com article about that today, saying essentially no one can really say. I mean, what are the potential steps that would be taken in the case of a conviction?
I agree with the headline there. There's a lot of different forks in the road. So one thing for us all to remember is that a conviction does not mean that there absolutely would be prison time, that is within Judge Merchan's discretion to say what the sentence would be. The other thing to remember is that there would be an appeal, and you can imagine that any type of sentence would be stayed while an appeal is ongoing. And in this case, there are a lot of issues that the defense could bring up on appeal. So there are just so many forks. We don't really know exactly what would happen, except I do want to remind everybody, a conviction doesn't mean, and therefore by the end of the week, the former president is inside a state prison cell. That's not how it's going to work.
Okay. Jessica Levinson, I'm sure we'll be seeing plenty of you this week, depending on when we get a verdict. Thank you.
Thank you.